Thor's fight with the giants, also known as Thors strid med Jatana, was painted by Martin Eskil Winge in 1872. Thor, from Old Norse Thor, is a prominent god in Germanic paganism. In Norse mythology, he is a hammer-wielding god associated with lightning, thunder, storms, sacred groves and trees, strength, the protection of humankind, hallowing and fertility. Besides Old Norse Thor, the deity occurs in Old English as Thunor, in Old Frisian as Thuna, in Old Saxon as Thunar, and in Old High German as Donar, all ultimately stemming from the Proto-Germanic feeling Thun, araz, meaning thunder. Thor is a prominently mentioned god throughout the recorded history of the Germanic peoples, from the Roman occupation of regions of Germania to the Germanic expansions of the migration period to his high popularity during the Viking Age, when, in the face of the process of the Christianization of Scandinavia, emblems of his hammer, Mjolnir, were worn, and Norse pagan personal names containing the name of the god bear witness to his popularity. Narratives featuring Thor are most prominently attested in Old Norse, where Thor appears throughout Norse mythology. In stories recorded in medieval Iceland, Thor bears at least 15 names, is the husband of the golden-haired goddess Sif and the lover of the Jotun Jarnsaxa. With Sif, Thor fathered the goddess and possible Valkyrie, Thrudar. With Jarnsaxa, he fathered Magni. With a mother whose name is not recorded, he fathered Modi, and he is the stepfather of the god Ulla. Thor is the son of Odin and Jord. By way of his father Odin, he has numerous brothers, including Balder. Thor has two servants, Thialfi and Roskva rides in a cart or chariot pulled by two goats, Tangrisnir and Tangjosta, whom he eats and resurrects, and is ascribed three dwellings, Bilskirnir, Thrudheimer and Thrudvanga. Thor wields the hammer Mjolnir, wears the belt Megingjord and the iron gloves Jarngriper, and owns the staff Gridarvollr. Thor's exploits, including his relentless slaughter of his foes and fierce battles with the monstrous serpent Jormungandr, and their foretold mutual deaths during the events of Ragnarok, are recorded throughout sources for Norse mythology. Into the modern period, Thor continued to be acknowledged in folklore throughout Germanic-speaking Europe. Thor is frequently referred to in place names. The day of the week, Thursday, bears his name. Modern English Thursday derives from Old English Thunres Dag, Thunor's Day, and names stemming from the pagan period containing his own continue to be used today, particularly in Scandinavia. Thor has inspired numerous works of art, and references to Thor appear in modern popular culture. Like other Germanic deities, veneration of Thor is revived in the modern period in heathenry. The name Thor is derived from Norse mythology. Its medieval Germanic equivalents or cognates are Donar, Old High German, Thunor, Old English, Thuna, Old Frisian, Thunar, Old Saxon, and Thor, Old Norse, the latter of which inspired the form Thor. Though Old Norse Thor has only one syllable, it too comes from an earlier Proto-Norse two-syllable form, which can be reconstructed as Thunur, evidenced by the poems Himiskvida and Thorsdrapa and modern Elfdalian Tuostag, Thursday, through the common Old Norse development of the sequence Unnar, two, or. All these forms of Thor's name descend from Proto-Germanic, but there is debate as to precisely what form the name took at that early stage. The form Thunraz has been suggested and has the attraction of clearly containing the sequence. Unar needed to explain the later form Thor. The form Thunuraz is suggested by Elfdalian Tuostag, Thursday, and by a runic inscription from around 700 from Halbjans in Sundre, Gotland, which includes the sequence Thunathurus. Finally, Tanaros, attested in the dative Tanaro and the Gaulish river name Tanarus, and further related to the Latin epithet tonans, attached to Jupiter, via the common Proto-Indo-European root for thunder, as 10H2. According to scholar Peter Jackson, those theonyms may have emerged as the result of the fossilization of an original epithet, or epiclesis, that is, invocational name, of the Proto-Indo-European thunder god *Perqunos, since the Vedic weather god Parjanya is also called Stanayitnu, thunderer. The potentially perfect match between the thunder gods, Thunaraz, which both go back to a common form Tn Ros, is notable in the context of early Celtic Germanic linguistic contacts, especially when added to other inherited terms with thunder attributes, such as meldo, from perkunos weapon, and ferkunia, from perkunos realm. The English weekday name Thursday comes from Old English Thunrasdag, meaning Day of Tunor, with influence from Old Norse Thorsdaga. The name is cognate with Old High German Donnerstag. All of these terms derive from a late Proto-Germanic weekday name along the lines of Thun, Araz, a calque of Latin Jovis Dies, Day of Jove, CF, modern Italian Giovedi, French Judy, Spanish Jueves. By employing a practice known as Interpretatio Germanica during the Roman period, ancient Germanic peoples adopted the Latin weekly calendar and replaced the names of Roman gods with their own. Beginning in the Viking Age, personal names containing the theonym Thor are recorded with great frequency, whereas no examples are known prior to this period. Thor-based names may have flourished during the Viking Age as a defiant response to attempts at Christianization, similar to the widespread Viking Age practice of wearing Thor's hammer pendants. Historical attestations. Roman era, an altar stone for Hercules Magusanus from Bonn, dated 226 AD. The earliest records of the Germanic peoples were recorded by the Romans, and in these works Thor is frequently referred to via a process known as Interpretatio Romana, as either the Roman god Jupiter, also known as Jove, or the Greco-Roman god Hercules. The first clear example of this occurs in the Roman historian Tacitus's late 1st century work Germania. Writing about the religion of the Suebi, a confederation of Germanic peoples, he comments that among the gods, Mercury is the one they principally worship. They regard it as a religious duty to offer to him on fixed days human as well as other sacrificial victims. Hercules and Mars they appease by animal offerings of the permitted kind, and adds that a portion of the Suebi also venerate Isis. In this instance, Tacitus refers to the god Odin as Mercury, Thor as Hercules, and the god Tyr as Mars. The identity of the Isis of the Suebi has been debated. In Thor's case, the identification with the god Hercules is likely at least in part due to similarities between Thor's hammer and Hercules' club. In his annals, Tacitus again refers to the veneration of Hercules by the Germanic peoples. He records a wood beyond the river Weser, in what is now northwestern Germany, as dedicated to him. A deity known as Hercules Magusanus was venerated in Germania Inferior. Due to the Roman identification of Thor with Hercules, Rudolf Simek has suggested that Magusanus was originally an epithet attached to the Proto-Germanic deity Thunras. Donar redirects here. For other uses, see Donar, disambiguation. Thunor redirects here. For the genus of shrimp, see Alpheus, crustacean. Boniface bears his crucifix after felling Thor's oak in Bonifacius, painted in 1905 by Emile Dupler. The first recorded instance of the name of the god appears upon the Nordendorf fibulae, a piece of jewelry created during the migration period and found in Bavaria. The item bears an elder futhark inscribed with the name Thonar, the southern Germanic form of Thor's name. Around the second half of the 8th century, Old English texts mention Tunor, which likely refers to a Saxon version of the god. In relation, Thunor is sometimes used in Old English texts to gloss Jupiter. The god may be referenced in the poems Solomon and Saturn, where the thunder strikes the devil with a fiery axe, and the Old English expression Thunarad, meaning thunder ride, may refer to the god's thunderous goat-led chariot. A 9th century AD codex from Mainz, Germany, known as the Old Saxon Baptismal Vow, records the name of 3 Old Saxon gods, Uodin, Saxnote and Thunaia, by way of their renunciation as demons, in a formula to be repeated by Germanic pagans formally converting to Christianity. According to a near contemporary account, the Christian missionary St. Boniface felled an oak tree dedicated to Jove in the 8th century, the Donau's Oak in the region of Hesse, Germany. The Kentish royal legend, probably 11th century, contains the story of a villainous reeve of Ecgbert of Kent called Tunor, who is swallowed up by the earth at a place from then on known as Tunores Hlaiwe, meaning Tunor's Mound in Old English. Gabriel Tourville Petre saw this as an invented origin for the place name, demonstrating loss of memory that Thunor had been a god's name. A 16th century depiction of Norse gods from Olaus Magnus's A Description of the Northern Peoples, from left to right, Frigg, Thor and Odin. In the 11th century, chronicler Adam of Bremen records in his Gesta Hammerburgensis Ecclesiae Pontificum that a statue of Thor, who Adam describes as mightiest, sits in the temple at Uppsala in the center of a triple throne flanked by Woden and Friko, located in Gamla Uppsala, Sweden. Adam details that Thor, they reckon, rules the sky. He governs thunder and lightning, winds and storms, fine weather and fertility, and that Thor, with his mace, looks like Jupiter. Adam also mentions that the people of Uppsala had appointed priests to each of the gods, and that these priests were to offer up sacrifices. In Thor's case, these sacrifices were done when plague or famine threatened. Earlier in the same work, Adam relays that in 1030 an English preacher named Wulfrid was lynched by assembled Germanic pagans for profaning a representation of Thor. Two objects with runic inscriptions invoking Thor date from the 11th century, one from England and one from Sweden. The first, the Canterbury charm from Canterbury, England, calls upon Thor to heal a wound by banishing a Thurs II, the Queenaby amulet, invokes protection by both Thor and his hammer. On 4 or possibly 5 runestones, an invocation to Thor appears that reads, "May Thor hallow these runes or this monument." The invocation appears thrice in Denmark and a single time in Västergötland, Sweden. A 5th appearance may possibly occur on a runestone found in Södermanland, Sweden, but the reading is contested. Pictorial representations of Thor's hammer appear on a total of 5 runestones found in Denmark, and in the Swedish counties of Västergötland and Södermanland, the design is believed to be a heathen response to Christian runestones, which often have a cross at the center. One of the stones shows a face or mask above the hammer, which Anders Hultgard has argued is the face of Thor. At least 3 stones depict Thor fishing for the serpent Jormungandr: the Hordum stone in Thai, Denmark, the Altuna runestone in Altuna, Sweden, and the Gosforth cross in Gosforth, England. Sune Lindqvist argued in the 1930s that the image stone, Ardra VIII on Gotland, depicts 2 scenes from the story, Thor ripping the head of Hymir's ox and Thor and Hymir in the boat, but this has been disputed. Runes on the Valander runestone in Sweden mean "May Thor hallow," Thor and Jormungandr by Lawrence Frolick. In the 12th century, more than a century after Norway was officially Christianized, Thor was still being invoked by the population, as evidenced by a stick bearing a runic message found among the Briggen inscriptions in Bergen, Norway. On the stick, both Thor and Odin are called upon for help. Thor is asked to receive the reader and Odin to own them. In the Poetic Edda compiled during the 13th century from traditional source material reaching into the pagan period, Thor appears or is mentioned in the poems Voluspa, Grimnismal, Skirnismal, Harbardsljod, Himiskvida, Lokasena, Thrimskvida, Alvismal, and Hindluljod. The foretold death of Thor, as depicted by Lawrence Frolick in 1895, Thor and the Midgard Serpent by Emil Doppler in 1905. In the poem Voluspa, a dead Volva recounts the history of the universe and foretells the future to the disguised god Odin, including the death of Thor. Thor, she foretells, will do battle with the great serpent during the immense mythic war waged at Ragnarok. There he will slay the monstrous snake, yet after, he will only be able to take 9 steps before succumbing to the venom of the beast. Benjamin Thorpe's translation reads, "Then comes the mighty son of Odin. Odin's son goes with the monster to fight. Midgard's Veor in his rage will slay the worm. 9 feet will go Fjorgyn's son, bowed by the serpent who feared no foe. All men will their homes forsake." Henry Adams Bellows' translation offers, "Hither there comes the son of Hlothin. The bright snake gapes to heaven above. Against the serpent goes Odin's son. In anger smites the warder of earth. Forth from their homes must all men flee. 9 paces fares the son of Fjorgyn, and, slain by the serpent, fearless he sinks. Afterwards, says the Volva, the sky will turn black before fire engulfs the world. The stars will disappear. Flames will dance before the sky. Steam will rise. The world will be covered in water and then it will be raised again, green and fertile. In the poem Grimnismal, the god Odin, in disguise as Grimnir, and tortured, starved and thirsty, imparts in the young Agnar cosmological lore, including that Thor resides in Thrudheim, and that every day Thor wades through the rivers Kormt and Ormt, and the two Kalauga. There, Grimnir says, Thor sits as judge at the immense cosmological world tree, Yggdrasil. In Skirnismal, the god Freya's messenger, Skirnir threatens the fair Gerda, with whom Freya is smitten, with numerous threats and curses, including that Thor, Freya and Odin will be angry with her, and that she risks their potent wrath. Thor is the main character of Harbardsljod, where, after travelling from the east, he comes to an inlet where he encounters a ferryman who gives his name as Harbardra, Odin again in disguise, and attempts to hail a ride from him. The ferryman, shouting from the inlet, is immediately rude and obnoxious to Thor and refuses to ferry him. At first, Thor holds his tongue, but Harbardr only becomes more aggressive, and the poem soon becomes a flighting match between Thor and Harbardr, all the while revealing lore about the two, including Thor's killing of several Jotnar in the east and women on Hlisi, now the Danish island of Lyso. In the end, Thor ends up walking instead. Thor is again the main character in the poem Hymiskvida, where after the gods have been hunting and have eaten their prey, they have an urge to drink. They shake the twigs and interpret what they say. The gods decide that they would find suitable cauldrons at Aegir's home. Thor arrives at Aegir's home and finds him to be cheerful, looks into his eyes, and tells him that he must prepare feasts for the gods. Annoyed, Aegir tells Thor that the gods must first bring to him a suitable cauldron to brew ale in. The gods search but find no such cauldron anywhere. However, Tyr tells Thor that he may have a solution. East of Elivagar lives Hymir, and he owns such a deep kettle. So, after Thor secures his goats at Egil's home, Thor and Tyr go to Hymir's hall in search of a cauldron large enough to brew ale for them all. They arrive, and Tyr sees his 900-headed grandmother and his gold-clad mother, the latter of which welcomes them with a horn. After Hymir, who is not happy to see Thor, comes in from the cold outdoors, Tyr's mother helps them find a properly strong cauldron. Thor eats a big meal of 2 oxen, all the rest eat but 1, and then goes to sleep. In the morning he awakes and informs Hymir that he wants to go fishing the following evening and that he will catch plenty of food but that he needs bait. Hymir tells him to go get some bait from his pasture, which he expects should not be a problem for Thor. Thor goes out, finds Hymir's best ox and rips its head off. After a lacuna in the manuscript of the poem, Hymiskvida abruptly picks up again with Thor and Hymir in a boat out at sea. Hymir catches a few whales at once and Thor baits his line with the head of the ox. Thor casts his line and the monstrous serpent Jormungandr bites. Thor pulls the serpent on board and violently slams him in the head with his hammer. Jormungandr shrieks and a noisy commotion is heard from underwater before another lacuna appears in the manuscript. After the second lacuna, Hymir is sitting in the boat, unhappy and totally silent, as they row back to shore. On shore, Hymir suggests that Thor should help him carry a whale back to his farm. Thor picks both the boat and the whales up and carries it all back to Hymir's farm. After Thor successfully smashes a crystal goblet by throwing it at Hymir's head on Tyr's mother's suggestion, Thor and Tyr are given the cauldron. Tyr cannot lift it, but Thor manages to roll it, and so with it they leave. Some distance from Hymir's home, an army of many-headed beings led by Hymir attacks the two, but are killed by the hammer of Thor. Although one of his goats is lame in the leg, the two manage to bring the cauldron back, have plenty of ale, and so from then on return to Tyr's for more every winter. In the poem Lokasenna, the half-god Loki angrily fights with the gods in the sea entity Aegir's hall. Thor does not attend the event, however, as he is away in the east for unspecified purposes. Towards the end of the poem, the fighting turns to Sif, Thor's wife, whom Loki then claims to have slept with. The god Freya's servant Bela interjects and says that since all of the mountains are shaking, she thinks that Thor is on his way home. Bela adds that Thor will bring peace to the quarrel, to which Loki responds with insults. Thor arrives and tells Loki to be silent and threatens to rip Loki's head from his body with his hammer. Loki asks Thor why he is so angry and comments that Thor will not be so daring to fight the wolf Fenrir when it eats Odin, a reference to the foretold events of Ragnarok. Thor again tells him to be silent and threatens to throw him into the sky where he will never be seen again. Loki says that Thor should not brag of his time in the East, as he once crouched in fear in the thumb of a glove, a story involving deception by the magic of Utgarda Loki recounted in the prose Edda book Gylfaginning, which he comments was hardly like Thor. Thor again tells him to be silent, threatening to break every bone in Loki's body. Loki responds that he intends to live a while yet and again insults Thor with references to his encounter with Utgarda Loki. Thor responds with a fourth call to be silent and threatens to send Loki to hell. At Thor's final threat, Loki gives in, commenting that only for Thor will he leave the hall, for I know alone that you do strike, and the poem continues. In the comedic poem Thrimskvida, Thor again plays a central role. In the poem, Thor wakes and finds that his powerful hammer, Mjolnir, is missing. Thor turns to Loki and tells him that nobody knows that the hammer has been stolen. The two go to the dwelling of the goddess Freyja, and so that he may attempt to find Mjolnir, Thor asks her if he may borrow her feather cloak. Freyja agrees, and says she would lend it to Thor even if it were made of silver or gold, and Loki flies off, the feather cloak whistling. In Jotunheimer, the Jotun Thrymr sits on a barrow, plaiting golden collars for his female dogs and trimming the manes of his horses. Thrymr sees Loki and asks what could be amiss among the Aesir and the elves. Why is Loki alone in Jotunheimer? Loki responds that he has bad news for both the elves and the Aesir, that Thor's hammer, Mjolnir, is gone. Thrymr says that he has hidden Mjolnir 8 leagues beneath the earth, from which it will be retrieved, but only if Freyja is brought to him as his wife. Loki flies off, the feather cloak whistling away from Jotunheimer and back to the court of the gods. Thor asks Loki if his efforts were successful, and that Loki should tell him while he is still in the air, as tales often escape a sitting man, and the man lying down often barks out lies. Loki states that it was indeed an effort and also a success, for he has discovered that Thrymr has the hammer, but that it cannot be retrieved unless Freyja is brought to Thrymr as his wife. The two return to Freyja and tell her to put on a bridal headdress, as they will drive her to Jotunheimer. Freyja, indignant and angry, goes into a rage, causing all of the halls of the Aesir to tremble in her anger, and her necklace, the famed Brisingamen, falls from her. Freyja pointedly refuses.